Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and today I'm delighted to be joined by ex-Celt Alan Thompson. Alan, we're in the heart of Manchester, in the offices and the studio of the Stretford Paddock, so a big shout out to the Stretford Paddock guys. Thank you for inviting us in. It's going to be an absolute pleasure to have a wee chat to yourself about your new book, Tomo. Now, I always look at footballers and you look at some of them and think, there's not a book in them, but I've always felt there's a book in yourself. When did you actually come to the realisation this was for you, you're going to start this project and get your life story out there?
Well, it's funny really, because I've been asked over the years by numerous people to do a book, while ex-teammates of mine, Chris Sutton, John Hartson, Lenny, Stillian, Petrov, these lads have all been doing books, and I was exactly of the thinking of what you've just said. I don't think I've got a book in this type of thing. So the people I spoke to would say, listen, just let us be the judge of that. You just talk and you just answer questions and we'll be the judge if you've got a book in you, we think you have, type of thing. So it was in between COVID hitting and lockdowns and stuff like that. Someone got in touch and I thought maybe there's, it took a little bit of persuading over the years to do it, but I just thought, now's the time I'm approaching 50, late 40s, so let's get it out there.
Now, what I found really interesting chatting to you on the way through to the studio, Alan, is the fact that you got together, you actually moved in with the author, the ghostwriter, so that he could get right in about your story, right under the floorboards.
It was. It's not easy. I think even if you go and visit family in different parts of the country or different parts of the world and their family members, it's always difficult to move into someone else's house with, or if you go on holiday with other families, it's always difficult because you've got your habits and stuff like that, and some bad habits and some good. But no, even if I go and stay at my parents' house in Newcastle, when I go to Newcastle to visit, it's not awkward, but it's, you like your own space. So moving into a complete stranger's house with his wife and kids was difficult. I'm not gonna lie about it, but they made me really welcome. It was hard work doing it, 6, 7, sometimes 8 hours a day blocks, chatting about your life from being a kid to the present day. It was draining at times, but I'm looking back on it, I'm pleased I'd done it in terms of going in there 5 or 6 days and smashing it and getting out and then letting him get on with the writing,
when I look at the title of Geordie, Bhoy, the fan bases in Newcastle and Celtic are famous. I mean, I've been to a lot of Newcastle games and obviously a lot of games at Celtic Park. What do you think the similarities are between those two sets of fans?
I don't think, they're not a million miles apart, Glasgow's 90 miles north of the border and Newcastle's just south of the border, so I think the people are similar, from industrial cities and working men and people who go out and earn their hard-earned cash to travel to games and watch games and support their club. And no, they're very similar in their approach to football and the style of football they like and the kind of players they like. So now there's a definite similarity between, as you say, the Geordie boy type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, again, I always think about footballers as kids and signing for their hometown club, if you like. How proud did that make your parents and your wider family?
I think as a kid, you'd be a Celtic fan as a kid, so it would have been your dream to pull on the hoops. For me, it was to pull on the black and white stripes, and I was lucky eventually when I was nearly 18 by the time I got in the team, because I had a serious car accident when I was 16, so it was touch and go whether I was going to walk again, let alone go and make a career in football again. So it was a proud moment where 2 years down the line after my car accident, I eventually pulled on the black and white stripes. There was a lot of stress involved in the process of getting back fit, not just for me mentally and physically, but no doubt for my parents and family as well. But I had a big support system around us, and eventually when I got there and played in front of the Gallagher end, was a dream come true without a doubt.
Looking at the images that appear in the book and the story about that serious car accident, Alan, you're that busy as a youngster trying to make it in the game, recuperating from that injury. Was it a lot later that you started considering how that affected you, how that might have even affected your career?
I think you look back on it over the years, when you do look back, and probably an incident that has shaped you really as a person, how you think about things, how you appreciate things, and not to take things for granted without a doubt, because as I said, it was touch and go. first few weeks in hospital was whether I was going to walk again, let alone be able to go on a football pitch and get involved in physical contact and stuff like that. So no, it definitely has an effect on your mental, how you think about things.
Yeah, you know, when you're looking at the guys you come through the ranks with, talk to me about the Kingdom bonds you have with players like Lee Clark, and that lasts a lifetime, doesn't it?
Yeah, excuse me. Steve Watson, Lee Clark. These lads are, they've been friends since 6-7 year old. So, and then now still, 30-40 years on, we're still close friends and still have a close bond. And yeah, it was difficult for me, not going to lie, when I was in hospital and I had my big neck brace on when I was 16, then 17. And these lads are going on and getting in the first team at Newcastle under Ozzy Ordiles, then Kevin Keegan, and I'm sitting in a stand watching my best mates get in the team. It was frustrating, proud for me to watch them get in the team, but I just wanted to be out there alongside them, so I had to take a back seat and eventually then get alongside them. So yeah, brilliant.
When I'm looking through your career, I'm always obviously looking for the Celtic connections, and back then Roy Aitken and Mark McGee were the senior pros. How were they with the young guys?
Absolutely fantastic. There must have been early 30s at the time, Roy and Mark, but they were great around the dressing room. They were great at communicating with the players they were playing with, and the young lads like myself and the lads I've mentioned, Lee Clark, Steve Watson, Steve Howie, Robbie Elliott. They give us a lot, so it was great for us to sit and watch how senior pros done things, who played in big games and played for big clubs. And mentioning Roy and Mark McGee, even when I was at Bolton Wanderers, we had ex-players from Celtic as well. Andy Walker and Owen Coyle had a big affinity with Celtic. John McGinley was a big Celtic man. So as a young lad, I was always around people who never shut up about Celtic, so I got to hear a lot about it, So they're planting seeds, because obviously it comes to fruition. You're the middle of your career. When you're at Newcastle, a World Cup winner gives you your debut. What did you take away from your time working with Ozzy Ordiles? Couldn't understand a word he was saying, but no, he was brilliant with us. It wasn't a brilliant time in Newcastle's history, so he went to the youth and he looked at the youth and he thought they were good enough and he put them in. But from a kid watching him play for Spurs with Ricky Vere and Glenn Hoddle and all that, to be your manager, he was fantastic. He just wanted us to enjoy our football. He wanted us to enjoy having the ball at our feet, passing it around. He wanted it to entertain the crowd as you want. And even just in training, he joined in and you could see what a player he must have been when he played. He'd be training with a fag in his mouth and he'd still be the best player on the pitch. So no, it was brilliant for us as young lads to have a World Cup win and Diego Maradona's best pal as your manager. Yeah,
I remember Spurs played a testimonial when Maradona was the guest player, and it was through Ordiles, his friendship with him.
I was there. I was on trial at Spurs at the time. Right. It was Tony Galvin's testimonial, and I was 13, maybe 14, and I was down in London, and I was staying in digs with a young Jamie Redknapp at the time, and it was John Moncur Senior was the head of youth at Tottenham at the time, and there was a game in the night match, and it was Tottenham, Tony Galvin, as I said, and Maradona was playing as a guest. So just as a young lad, just watching him warm up and stuff like that, the things he was doing with the ball was like, you watch stuff on YouTube of him now and he was doing that kind of stuff, and it was just like, wow, he was my hero, one of my heroes. So to get to watch him as a kid was brilliant.
Superb. And you're talking about heroes, a lot of Newcastle fans hero worship Kevin Keegan. He comes in as the next manager, and he goes on this spell, and I was saying this earlier on, where he built a very entertaining team. A lot of neutrals kind of fell in love with Newcastle then. You were part of the beginning of the Keegan revolution, but you decided at your point it was time to move. At that stage, how difficult was it? Did you think, maybe I'll come back once I've proved myself, Alan?
I think when I did leave, I think you do think, one day maybe I'll go and do well for another club or a couple of clubs and get a dream move back to Newcastle, but that wasn't to be. And as I said earlier, I'd been injured for nigh on 2 years after the car crash, and I just wanted to play football, so I didn't really want to be sat in the stand. I'd done that enough already in my early career, so it was gut-wrenching for me to leave Newcastle to go to Bolton Wanderers, but that dream move didn't come back, but there was one or two good moves along the way.
Oh, definitely. I mean, when you look at that Bolton team, though, again, from a neutral perspective, they were a team that you took an interest in because they were obviously going places, 2 promotions, a cup final. You had guys like Stubbsy coming through, yourself, Jason McAteer, and some of the ex-Celts that you mentioned, including Stevie Fulton well.
Yeah, Chopper Fulton.
And they're all planting seeds about Celtic, which is a good thing. Do you think it did get to the point, no, Alan, that you reached the heights that you could possibly attain with Bolton and you had to take another step up?
Yeah, I think I'd had 2 promotions to the Premier League, one as champions, one through the playoffs, which is a great way of getting promoted. It's probably the toughest way, the most stressful way, but when you win the playoff final at Wembley, it's some buzz. So 2 promotions, 2 relegations, and the second relegation, you've played in the Premier League twice with Bolton, and it was just, you want to stay at that level. And no disrespect to Bolton, it's a fantastic club. Had great years there with great players, great managers. Bruce Rioch took me there. Colin Todd was his number 2. Then Colin Todd went on to be the manager. And you just wanted to get, when you've played at that level, you want to try and stay at that level. And I appreciate what Bolton did for me, and I hope Bolton appreciate what I did for them. But it was time to move.
And when you did, I found it interesting that one of several managers that was interested was indeed Martin O'Neill. Did you talk to Martin O'Neill at Leicester? Yeah,
I spoke to Martin. He tried to persuade to go to Leicester, but at the time I was, no disrespect to Leicester, they were doing well. They were, they're always top half of the table. They were getting the cup finals and things like that. But I was talking to big clubs, and I wanted to play. I've been at Newcastle and then Bolton, and I wanted to get to a level where I thought I deserved to be.
Well, you joined your first European Cup winners in Aston Villa. And again, when I look at that, I look at Dion Dublin, Stan Collymore, Benito Carboni, and it was a successful period in that the club gets to the FA Cup final, Alan, and that was a run you were involved in. Were you disappointed to miss out on the final against Chelsea?
Oh yeah, hugely. We done some team shape for the game on the Thursday at Bodymore Heath Villa's training ground, and I was in a couple of the teams that got set up, so I thought, I've got a right good chance of starting against Chelsea on Saturday, and then lo and behold, Saturday comes and I wasn't even on the bench, so huge disappointment. Villa lost the game 1-0 to Chelsea. Lo and behold, I'd probably 4 or 5 months down the line, I'd be moving to Celtic, and it was bizarre because I was in the bar at Wembley while the cup final was on, and ended up talking to Chris Sutton. He was in the same boat I was at Villa. He was in the same boat at Chelsea. He got left out of their squad. He wasn't stripped either. So it was the first time I'd met Chris. I knew of him, had friends who played with him for England under 21s, Lee Clark, Steve Watson, who I'd heard all about him. They said he was a right toe rag. So when I eventually got to meet him, I thought he's all right, he's a decent lad. But little did we know, 3 or 4 months, I think it might have been, down the line after the cup final at Wembley, that we'd be teammates at Celtic.
It's incredible when you think of the disappointment of that FA Cup final for the both of you. 3 years later, you're playing in a European final. It's astonishing, Alan.
Aye, I think we'd both had slightly tough times. I don't think the transfer fee helped Chris when he went to Chelsea. £10.5 million a big transfer fee back then, really big one. Plus he fell over the ball 3 times on his debut, which didn't help him with the Chelsea fans. I thought we've signed a dud here. But when I eventually got to play with Chris, he was anything but a dud. He was a fantastic player.
And again, fair play to Martin O'Neill, because he's been given a knockback, but he comes back in a second time for Celtic.
Yeah, I think Martin was good at that. He was good at seeing people who had potential, who hadn't quite fulfilled their potential, if you want. I certainly hadn't fulfilled my potential at Villa, I admit that. And Chris will probably admit that about himself at Chelsea. So Martin, he had a good eye for a player, and thankfully he had Chris's and my in heart.
You talk to players who played under him at Celtic, and they all hold him in such high esteem, Alan. And a lot of those guys have gone on to management as well. I mean, what was your thoughts about Martin O'Neill's style, not only of a coach but as a man manager?
I wouldn't put him down as a coach at all. He was more of a man manager who's properly cut out the cloth of Brian Clough, no doubt about that. He had his staff with him, whichever job Martin had, whether it was Wickham, Leicester, Celtic, Aston Villa, Republic of Ireland, Sunderland. He took those staff with him, and that just shows his loyalty. But he was very much a man manager, bit of a psychologist. He just knew when to say the right thing at the right time to the right person. He realised we were all different. One player needed a different approach to another player, and that's just what he was good at, man management.
When you consider that the club had not won a treble since the late 60s. We hadn't progressed beyond Christmas in Europe since 1980. Martin O'Neill comes in and that team changes all that. Did they ever break down what the blueprint was? What was the master plan, Alan?
I don't think there was a blueprint or a it might be in a green print, but I just think, I remember watching the interview when he first got the job at Celtic, and he goes into the steps at the front of Celtic Park and he said, listen, I'll try my best to close the gap on, I think, was it 15 or 18 points the previous season Celtic had lost the league by. So I think his intentions was to close the gap first and foremost and then go on and win it. I think if you sat down with Martin now and asked him, I don't think he envisaged winning the treble in his first season. But it's no surprise because of the nucleus of a team that he inherited. You know, your Paul Lamberts, your Tom Boyd, your Jackie McNamara's, your Henrik Larssons, and then the players he was bringing in. It was no real surprise in the dressing room that we went on to win the treble, but if you'd have said at the start of the season, you'd win the league, and then we'll kick on from there. But the fact that we won the treble at the start of the season just says a lot about Martin and his staff and the players.
A lot's been said, Alan, about your relationship with the Old Firm derby back then. I mean, very successful in terms of the goals and the success rate with the victories, but there were flashpoints. What is it about that game that got to you in that respect?
I just think
one of them wasn't a sending off, by the way.
One of them wasn't. Definitely one of them wasn't a sending off. But you get roped in a little bit, and it's blood and thunder. There's nothing like the Old Firm game. There's derbies all over the world that are fantastic derbies, but that's just got something about it. That Celtic Rangers game, the build up to it, thank God most of them were like midday kickoffs, because if a lot of them had been evening kickoffs, they're long days, you know, waiting for a big game like that, the day becomes dragged out, you know, and thank God there were early kickoffs, most of them. But yeah, you can get roped in, and bizarrely down the line when I went into the coaching side, you end up speaking to the players and telling the players about, you know, keep your discipline, and I wasn't being hypocritical about that, because I was trying to teach them to learn from my mistakes. You know, I'd done it 3 times. Twice probably being a red card, 1 definitely not, but you just try and pass on your knowledge to them to say, listen, 10 men in this game, you ain't winning it. So, and I'd learnt that from my mistakes.
Yeah, they were a strong side, Alan, and I think when you have that turnaround in that debut season, it's an astonishing feat. Which players did you gravitate towards? You'd already spoken to Chris Sutton, as you've explained. Which players became your kind of pals?
Well, we were quite a tight group. It had been Chris, Jackie Mack, Paul Lambert, John Horton, Lenny when they come in, Henrik, Johan Mialbi. We'd spend a lot of time in hotels, so we'd often sit around after dinner on an evening before a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon game, and would spend a lot of time playing cards or having a coffee. The staff would come and sit with us, and they'd pick our brains, we'd pick their brains, and trying to get the formation off them, who's playing tomorrow and all that kind of stuff. So it was a tight group. Chris was probably my closest pal, Chris Sutton. We got really tight in those years, but in general, the group in general was really tight.
I look at Martin O'Neill, and I'm not sure if he was a disciplinarian or if he allowed the guys to go and get a bit of downtime. Was it somewhere in between? How did he approach that?
Yeah, he was. Listen, he knew what we needed. He knew when we looked tired. He knew when we needed days off. He knew when we needed to go away for a couple of days as a group, or he knew where he just wanted you to go and spend some time with your family. He was good at judging what we needed as a group. And listen, some days he might not give everyone a day off. He might just say to 2 or 3, you know, the older boys, Paul Lambert or Tom Boyd, you know, you go and have a couple of days, you don't need to train this week, come back in on Thursday. And very old school, but he didn't often get it wrong.
You know, when you're looking at Henrik Larsson, obviously as a Celtic fan, we idolise him. What was he like in terms of his discipline and application? Was he any different from any of the other teammates?
No, it was all coming really professional back then when I joined Celtic. Even before that, it was probably the mid-90s when all the diet and the sports science started coming in. So, no, Henrik was no different to anyone. We didn't have anyone in the dressing room really who was out of condition, or can I say that? I mean, John Horton might have 25 packets of hula hoops before the game sometimes. But no, we trained hard, we looked after ourselves. Yeah, we let our head down if the gaffer let us go for a night out or a day out golfing and a few beers or whatever. So we'd all get involved in that, and Henrik would be no different.
See, when you talk about Big John, I think if you removed that, you removed something from his game, Alan.
Oh yeah, listen, I was pleased when he failed his medical at Rangers. So pleased when he signed for us, because you want him in our team, not their team, without any shadow of a doubt. He must have been a nightmare to play against. Completely different to Henrik, completely different to Sutty, but technically, in the air, holding the ball up, finishing, John was as good as anyone. And like I said, was pleased when he failed his medical at Rangers and he come to Celtic. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. The following season, after having a clean sweep domestically, we started setting down markers in Europe. I remember the 4-3 game, memorable game against Juventus, as being one of the best I've seen Chris Sutton performing. And at that stage, I think he was at a stage with England, for example, where he had more or less said, I'm not playing, and he wasn't going to be selected. Do you think that was his peak and he was good enough to be in and around the England squad at that point?
Oh, I think he could have played upwards of 20 caps for England, Chris, had he not have had the fallout with, I think it was Glenn Hoddle in the FA, over some incident with an England B squad or something, I don't know. But Chris could have been an addition to any England squad with any manager, with any players, because he was so, he could play anywhere. He could play up front, he could play holding midfield, he could play at the back at a push. So he'd have been, if you're picking 22 players for a big, World Cup squad or a European Championship squad, someone who can play three positions and play three positions well, what an addition that would be. So I think, did he get one cap, Chris? I don't know, but no, for me, Chris could have played upwards of, 25, 30 caps. When
you break into the England squad and you're the first Celtic player to represent England whilst at Celtic, how difficult is it to integrate with a squad where you've got the London-based players, you've got guys from Manchester and Liverpool, or did you find it quite easy?
I found it quite easy because a lot of the lads who were round about my age, I'd played with them in under 18s, under 21s, England teams, especially United lads, Gary Neville, Phil Neville, Nicky Butt. So I knew those lads. Gareth Southgate was there, even though I was playing for Celtic. Gareth had been my captain at Villa. So Gareth kind of took me under his wing and gave us a few warning shots who to keep away from and see what I thought of the setup and what I thought of the manager and stuff like that. But listen, no, it's a proud moment. As a kid, like I said earlier, you want to play for Newcastle. Play for Newcastle. If you've done that, what do you want? You want to play for your country. So after what I'd been through with the accident and stuff like that, and to eventually, I mean, I was 30, I think, when I got my England cap, so it was approaching nigh on the end, but it's still a proud moment.
Absolutely, and again in the record books for Celtic as well. Second season we win the league, but we will lose the Scottish Cup, and it's the showpiece, it's the final game. How difficult is that going into a pre-season, Alan? Yeah,
no one remembers the losers, do they? So it's always tough to take, but I think the best team normally wins the league. Very rarely does the second best or the third best team win the league, and we proved that season, even though we lost the cup final, we're still the best team in Scotland, and in my opinion that is.
Now, we mentioned earlier the European aspirations. We had seen a sign that we might be able to compete. The following season was that season, almost 20 years ago, and you look at some of the guys that are in that team, and they've spent some time down south, and two of the teams we play in that magnificent run are Blackburn and Liverpool. Did that add a bit of spice to the guys who had spent some time down there?
Yeah, of course it does, because you don't feel like you've got anything to prove, because you haven't, because we were playing against, you mentioned Juventus, Barcelona, AC Milan, Villarreal. We were playing good teams in Europe, Stuttgart, Celta Vigo, Porto, teams like this. So we fancied ourselves against anyone, but they were a good Blackburn team, Dwight York, Andy Cole up front, Gary Flitcroft, who noised us up after the first leg, along with a manager, Graham Souness. But no, we fancied ourselves against them, and like we did when we went to Anfield, we fancied ourselves there.
And you like a goal against Liverpool. I mean, you scored in the final for Bolton against Liverpool. That free kick against Liverpool, you enjoyed it?
Aye. I don't know. I don't know. I love playing in big games. I love the big games. I love the big atmosphere. I love the build-up. I loved everything about it. And I had a decent record. I scored a goal for Bolton in the Premier League at Anfield as well, which that got goal of the month on Match of the Day, which that one doesn't get spoke about very often, but it's normally the UEFA Cup goal or the goal at Wembley for Bolton.
Obviously, the disappointment of Seville was followed up with the disappointment of losing the league on the last day. But it's a season we look back on. I mean, as I say, I'm sure there'll be celebrations of that season 20 years later next year. Do you think that at that point, though, it was time for Celtic to build on that on a European stage? I know we hadn't won the league that season, Alan, and do you think Martin O'Neill was backed sufficiently by the club?
No, I think looking back on it, he could have been backed more. It just showed you what a good team we were, how far we got, and ran that Porto team close. They went on and won the Champions League the following season under Mourinho. So it just shows you how good they were. And I think with one or two additions to that team we had, we could have gone a step further, who knows, without a doubt.
You go into the European games again the following season. You beat Barcelona. You score the goal, an incredible goal. I mean, again, you said you like the big games, Tomo, but I mean, that is picking the biggest of the big.
Aye, I mean, I can remember the first 20 minutes against Barcelona and looking round at a few of the lads thinking, are you feeling like I'm feeling? Because I was breathing out my arse, like, and the lads are like, yeah, we couldn't get near them. And the fact that we stayed in the game and kept it at 0-0, then we had Rab sent off at half time, they got Motta sent off at half time, and then Saviola kicked out at me, start the second half. So it was 10v9, like it was like a game of basketball towards the end, and luckily I get one nodded down to us off Henrik and score the winning goal. Not many people get to say they scored the winning goal. I mean, that was some team. Eto'o, Puyol, Ronaldinho, Xavi, Valdez in goal. You know, it was a proper Barcelona team, and no, it's a brilliant night that was.
You know, I ask Celtic players this all the time, the European games, the Celtic versus Rangers games, being on that park, but now having watched last season and how it might have affected players, you know, that lack of energy, the momentum, the positivity, how important is that from the stands at Celtic Park?
I mean, it must have been difficult. I know there was pressure on because they're going for 10 in a row, and listen, we all wanted that to happen for obvious reasons. It hadn't been done before, but it must have been tough. I mean, no excuses. It must be tough playing games with no one in a stadium. I mean, I've done it before. Probably more so when you're a kid. You go and play at these big grounds, playing in a reserve game, and there's no one there, and you can hear all the shouting, you can hear people kicking the ball, people heading the ball. It must have been so tough. I would hate to have played an Old Firm game with no one in the crowd, or even having opposition fans in the crowd. Must be tough, just having a home support, because that's what big games are about, having both sets of fans going at each other and having the crack and having the banter, having the rivalry. But it must have had an adverse effect on the players, because, like you say, a full Celtic Park, you're a man up. Well, you might not be a man up because the referee might be on there, because it could be 12v12 then, couldn't it? But no, a full Celtic Park's definitely beneficial to the players, without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, you score against Barcelona, we retain the league title, win the Scottish Cup, but it felt as though we were coming to the end of an era, because Henrik Larsson leaves, of course, and he goes to Barcelona. When you're a teammate of someone as pivotal and as influential as that, what's your thoughts for the season? Because you can't replace him.
No, like you say, we could have had a huge pot of money to replace Henrik, but he was irreplaceable, wasn't he? So, yeah, listen, it probably definitely did leave the dressing room flat when he goes, and then you try and replace him, but you're not going to replace him, as we said, and yeah, it was tough, but you've got to get on with it. You know, it's your job, you're getting paid, you're playing for a world-class, massive, huge football club, you've got to get on with it.
The following season, again, disappointment at the end, losing the league on the last day, Black Sunday as it's called. We brought in Craig Bellamy. I thought he was a cracking signing from Newcastle. What type of boy was he? Was he integrated into the side pretty easy? He
was. I didn't know Bellas at all. Obviously knew of him, knew people who played with him at Newcastle who said he was a little fiery so-and-so in the dressing room. But he knew Chris Sutton from the early days at Norwich. Mm-hmm. So I think he knew he wasn't going to come into the Celtic dressing room and start causing havoc like he had at Newcastle with one or two people, players and staff at Newcastle. He got, a few little Barneys with, but I think he knew Chris before he come to Celtic, so he knew what Chris was about for a start. But it wasn't just Chris. There was strong people in that dressing room, a lot stronger than Bella's. So but he was a good signing. Even though I think when we signed him in January, we were 8 points clear. But he was a good signing, and one that we could have possibly took on a longer term deal had it not been, I don't know, about the funds.
You know, again, as a Celtic fan, you're always thinking about what happens behind the curtain. So in the big games in Seville, we've heard some of the stories about team talks, but I tend to think about some of the guys you're mentioning there, and if you were having any kind of wobbles, surely you just look to your left and there's Chris Sutton, look to your right, there's Larsson, and you go round them that way. And I'm pretty sure that confidence would have started to seep through the entire team.
Yeah, I mean, before the game or half time at the game, the manager was the only one that spoke. He didn't let his assistant John Robertson speak, didn't let Steve Walford speak. Martin spoke, and then when Martin finished speaking, he would go and get a cup of tea, and then John Robertson, Steve Walford would walk around the players individually and little pointers and have little chats and stuff like that. But the players police the dressing room themselves. You know, you look around the dressing room, you know, I don't know, Lenny, Sutty, Big John was on my right, Stillian was on my left, Henrik was on the corner there, Paul Lambert was there, Jackie McNamara, all people who had voices and had opinions. So if anything needed said, or if anyone needed dug out, if anyone wasn't doing their job, you got told. But it was never really it wasn't going to end up in fisticuffs unless Stillian took it one step too far one day with Bobo, but that's another story. But no, it was a team full of strong men, without a doubt.
How important were Robertson and Walford to that dynamic?
Brilliant, absolutely fantastic. The three of them, you knew who the boss was, you knew who the gaffer was, and then those two, they were the link. Whether it was at the training ground or whether it was upstairs at Celtic Park when we're having lunch, whether it was out on a lad's day out on the golf course having a few beers, they just linked the staff and the players to one. They were absolutely marvellous at their jobs.
I look at your high points of your Celtic career. You've won the England cap, you're in the history books for that. Goal against Barcelona, Liverpool, your Rangers goals, the trophies, the run to Seville. You won us the Scottish Cup as well, Alan. I mean, what moment do you look back on most proudly?
Good question, really. There's that many highs, and obviously there's been lows as well along the way. And it's amazing that the lows are the feelings that stays with you. The highs, the winning and the beating the Barcelonas, you wish you could bottle the high feeling, but it seems to be the low feelings that stay with you when you think about it or you talk about it now. You don't get a buzz when you talk about the Liverpool game or the run to Seville or the Barcelona game or the Old Firm games, but when you talk about losing the league at Kilmarnock or losing the league at Dunfermline, Motherwell, or losing
the... Slipped there,
I know. or losing in Seville, it's like, they're the feelings that come back and still really annoy you. You just wish you could bottle the good feelings. So it's difficult to pick out one moment, but I think winning the treble in my first season was some achievement.
You know, the disappointment of the Kilmarnock game and the Motherwell game, and you're in an away dressing room. Who is it you're then looking round to in that changing room to try and lift the team?
I don't think there's much to be said really. Last day of the season, there's not a lot can be said from anyone, whether it's a captain, whether it's Paul Lambert, Jackie or Boyd, whoever it was, or the manager. I just think that just needs time and space to try and let the wounds heal, but I don't think they do. But after we'd lost Helicopter Sunday at Motherwell, he not only have you lost the league, but the manager tells you in the dressing room at Fir Park that he's leaving after the cup final.
Was that the first thing you hearing, Alan?
That was the first we heard. We didn't know anything of it, so it was like, you've lost the league and the manager says I'm leaving. So after all he'd done and achieved at Celtic, his wife was poorly, Geraldine. Thankfully she's fine now, and but we had to get up for a cup final the following Saturday against Dundee United, which was tough, not gonna lie.
And again, you must be looking round. We've lost Henrik the previous season. Martin O'Neill's away. He's revolutionised the club. I mean, we're still seeing the effects to this day, Alan, of him turning that around, because up until that point we had a good season, a bad season, but he started domination. And you're looking ahead to the following season. Are you thinking yourself that it's coming to an end at that point?
Yeah, I think you do. I'd signed obviously, I think I signed a 5-year deal when I went, and then after 3 seasons, Martin O'Neill gives a new contract. So he showed a lot of loyalty and faith, and then he tells you he's leaving. It's kind of like, is my future going to lie here or not? I hung around for 18 months when Gordon Strachan was there, and it didn't quite work out. Yeah, I was approaching 34, and maybe you do think, yeah, maybe my time's up, so you move on.
You mentioned on our way down to the studio that you had met up with Martin recently. What's it like when he's in a room with all your old teammates? Is he still pretty much the gaffer that everybody looks up to?
He's still the gaffer, but he's a lot more relaxed, and it's more friendship now than anything. But obviously there's respect still there and everything, and he always has the last word. Even now, he always holds court. So as he always did, he still does. Anyone who went to the Hydro a few months ago when we done the gig at the Hydro with the gaffer and Henrik and Chris and Big John and Johan Mialbi, Lubo Moravcek, what a turnout it was, but he always has the last word.
You know, when Strachan comes in, I think as a Celtic fan, we're looking at that as downsizing. You had Martin O'Neill, who, when he comes into Celtic, is the best manager we could possibly appoint at that time. We're bringing in players ready-made from the English Premier League at that point. But when Gordon Strachan comes in, it's almost as if there's a completely different approach. We're starting to strip away a lot of the bigger, more influential players who were there under Martin O'Neill, and we're bringing in probably cheaper alternatives. Alan, do you think that kind of thing was taken away from Gordon Strachan, and that he was trying to strip some of the higher earners from the club?
Yeah, I don't think you're a million miles off. I think there was they'd been through a period, and there was youngsters coming through, and you look at that team, Martin's team, if you want to call it Martin's team, myself, approaching 34, Chris, very similar age to me, John Hartson, Stillian, Petrov had value in him because of his age. Stillian was still only probably, 26, 27. So there was value in Stillian in terms of transfer fee. So Stillian moved eventually to Villa. But I think, looking at myself, Chris, John, I think Lenny was the only one who really stayed on. Part of Gordon, he was Gordon's captain and then went on to Gordon's coaching team. So, I think it was probably Gordon come in and looked at it and thought, it needs freshening up.
You left for Leeds United initially on loan. You became the captain at the club. But I was reading just last night that fairly early on in your Celtic career, you started doing your badges. You had the plan to get into coaching, Tom. Or were you surprised that your teammate Lenny also went into that role, or do you think he was ready-made?
No, because when I'd done my UEFA B licence, we'd done it at Fir Park with the SFA. Lenny and I'd done it together, so I always knew he wanted to do it, and he always knew I wanted to do it. But it was something I was interested in. After I had my car accident, I had to start thinking out the box a little bit. This might not be how I want it to be. I might not be able to go and play 300, 400, 500, 600, 700 games. I might have to start thinking about now. So even in the early days when I was injured for 18 months, 2 years before I got back fit, luckily, I was even looking and watching at coaches then, what they did, how the mannerisms and how they spoke to people. Probably not the throwing the teacups of Jim Smith or anything like that at Newcastle at the time. God bless him. But no, it was something I knew I always wanted to do. And your football career is not going to last forever. So I knew when I finished that, I wanted to do that. When
the call comes from Lenny to come back to Celtic, and you've enjoyed some great success as part of Lenny's team, tell us about the dynamic of that coaching team with Mialbi, yourself, Neil Lennon, Gary Parker.
Well, Lenny'd been doing the same job at Celtic that I'd been doing at Newcastle, like a development role, developing the kids to get them ready to go into the first team or get them out on loan to go and get some experience. So he'd kind of done his apprenticeship, if you want, and he felt I'd done my apprenticeship, and he asked me to come in. He said, if I get the job full time, would you come in as my coach? And for me it was a no-brainer going back to Celtic. I was at Newcastle with probably a steady job, probably a job that I could have held for years or got promoted eventually through the ranks at Newcastle coaching, but it was a big opportunity for me to go back to Celtic and work with Lenny. Johan Mialbi was his number 2. Gary Parker was there. Gary didn't do an awful lot of coaching. Gary was good around the players. It was more myself. Lenny wasn't. A lot of people probably think Lenny was a bit like Martin O'Neill in terms of he was more of a man manager and like a bit of old school. Well, Lenny he could coach as well. He'd go out on the grass and he'd coach the team. He'd do his setup and how he wanted us to play and stuff like that. So, no, it was good. We bounced off each other well.
You start building a team, and obviously in season 2 we win the league. But when I'm looking at that period as well, there was a wee bit of a big bit of pressure on the likes of Neil Lennon off the park and on it, and you were in the midst of that. You've spoken about what happened when Alan McCoist and Neil Lennon come together in the shame game, and also his attack at Tynecastle. Now, I think that when you see it on the pages of a newspaper or on your computer screen, it takes away the reality of what's happening. I mean, how difficult was that for Lenny, and how were you able to support him at that stage?
I think a lot of people had to support him because it can't be easy. Well, it's not. I've seen it day to day, and I speak about it in depth in my book. There's quite a lot in about what was going on around that period, and it's tough, and he needed a support system around him, whether that was the board higher up, myself, Johan, Gary Parker, supporters I think rallied around him. A lot of people say it was, oh well, he brought it on himself, but listen, no one deserves bombs through the post and bullets and stuff like that. And that night we got rushed out of my local pub, the Drake, through plainclothes police because his life was in imminent danger. It's like, what? We're just out having a sociable pint, nothing mad, and you're getting put into unmarked police cars and put in safe houses. It's like, wow, it's football at the end of the day. So it was madness.
You do speak in depth about various aspects of your time at Celtic and obviously your departure as well. So get the book and have a good read at that as well.
Aye, it's all in the book, all in depth.
All in there.
Nothing's hidden. It's all there.
What I would ask you is, that's really the first time, Alan. You've already had the fright early doors in your career, which you said started making you think about a coaching career. But your career's ended at that stage. How difficult is that at that age to walk away from the game for, I think, 12 months?
What, when I left Celtic as a coach?
Yeah.
It's tough. It was obviously made public. It was front page, back page, and it's not nice. And I found it difficult. And it's something you look back on now, and that's 10 years ago now. It's 2012, so there's lots happened between then and now. And I'm going back to Celtic Park next month, and it'll be the first time I've been back to watch a game since 2012. So it's 10 years, and I'm looking forward to going back. I couldn't have gone back 5 years ago. It was too raw and everything that had gone on, and I didn't feel like I'd be welcome. But I've seen a lot of people over the last few years, and now I'm looking forward to going back and seeing some old faces. That's
disappointing from a Celtic fan's perspective, but I understand it, Alan. But during that period, every time you've met Celtic fans, I'm sure that you've had a good relationship with us. Oh,
absolutely. It's phenomenal wherever you are. It can be in Scotland, down south in England, on holiday, anywhere abroad. Not that we've been on holiday much in the last 2 years with this COVID, but you bump into Celtic fans. It's just a huge club, and they've got nice words to say. They want to talk about the run to Seville, the teams we're beating, the Old Firm games, winning goals, red cards. Very rarely do you get a negative comment from a Celtic fan, so now they've been brilliant with me.
Now, Alan, you've been out promoting your book. It's a great addition to the Celtic canon of literature, and hopefully we'll see you out promoting it on the live stage as well. We'll have the links to the book underneath the video, so check them out. Alan Thompson has joined me here at the offices in the studio of the Stretford Paddock, so thank you to the guys for letting us use your magnificent facility, and thank you to Alan Thompson for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it. Thank you.